Someone tried to unlock my apartment door before they knocked. I was sitting on my couch watching TV when I heard the handle move. At first, I thought one of my neighbors had the wrong apartment, but then I heard the deadbolt catch. Whoever was outside wasn't confused. They were trying to get in. Before I could even stand up, 3 slow knocks echoed through my apartment. A calm voice on the other side of the door said, "Maintenance." I muted the TV and listened. I hadn't requested repairs, and I hadn't received any notices about inspections. The voice repeated itself and said they needed to inspect my unit. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. A man stood in the hallway wearing a gray work shirt and holding a clipboard. At first glance, he looked legitimate, but something felt off immediately. He wasn't carrying any tools, no toolbox, no equipment, nothing except the clipboard. I asked him what company he worked for. There was a pause before he answered with the name of the apartment complex instead of an actual maintenance company. The answer didn't make sense. I told him I never received notice of an inspection. After another pause, he said he'd come back later and walked away. Once he disappeared down the hallway, I opened the door and examined the lock. Fresh scratches surrounded the keyhole. Someone had tried entering my apartment before they ever knocked. I photographed the scratches and emailed management. A few hours later, they responded and confirmed that no maintenance inspections were scheduled, no employees had been assigned to my building, and no contractors were working on the property. The response should have reassured me, but it did the opposite. It confirmed that the man outside my door didn't work there. The next morning, I found a maintenance notice pushed underneath my door. It looked real enough to fool almost anyone. The apartment logo was printed at the top, my unit number appeared in the corner, and the document stated that maintenance would need access to my apartment the following afternoon. The more I looked at it, the stranger it felt. The formatting wasn't quite right. The logo seemed slightly off-center. The font didn't match previous notices. I carried it directly to the leasing office. The manager took one look and immediately said it was fake. Someone had copied an older maintenance template and modified it. Then she told me something that made the situation worse. Mine wasn't the only report. Several residents had received similar notices during the previous week. Nobody knew who was leaving them, but someone was clearly trying to gain access to apartments throughout the complex. Over the next several days, more residents started talking. One tenant reported a man claiming to be maintenance. Another resident reported someone pretending to be pest control. Someone else saw a man carrying a clipboard while checking apartment numbers. At first, the reports seemed unrelated, but once people started comparing details, the similarities became impossible to ignore. Every description sounded nearly identical. Gray work shirt, clipboard or tablet, confident attitude, short conversations, quick departures. Management sent warning emails advising residents not to open doors without verification. The more stories surfaced, the more one detail stood out. Most of the apartments he approached belonged to people living alone, including mine. The realization sat in the back of my mind because it felt intentional, like he wasn't choosing apartments randomly, like he was selecting them. A few days later, I returned home from work and immediately noticed something strange. My welcome mat had moved, not by much, but enough for me to know it wasn't where I left it. I lived alone. Nobody else should have been touching anything near my door. I picked up the mat and found a small black mark on the concrete underneath. It looked deliberate. The next day, the mark was gone, but the mat had moved again. This time, it was angled differently. I started wondering whether someone was testing apartments. Maybe they wanted to know who paid attention. Maybe they wanted to know which residents noticed changes and which ones didn't. That evening, I carefully repositioned the mat exactly where it belonged. The following day, it had moved again. At that point, I knew someone was touching it. The building cameras covered entrances and elevators, but they didn't cover apartment doors. Whoever was doing this understood exactly where the blind spots were. As complaints increased, management hired overnight security. For several days, everything became quiet. No fake notices, no suspicious knocks, no reports from residents. People relaxed. Then the man adapted. Instead of appearing during the day, he started approaching apartments in the evening. Instead of introducing himself as maintenance, he claimed he was following up on maintenance requests. Instead of carrying a clipboard, he carried a tablet. The changes worked because people trusted him. One resident actually allowed him inside her apartment. Nothing appeared stolen afterward. Everything seemed normal. A week later, she realized personal documents sitting on her kitchen counter, tax paperwork, and financial records had been photographed. Police took a report, but nothing came from it. Nobody knew who the man really was. Nobody even knew his name. Everything changed on a Thursday evening. I returned home from work and found a maintenance inspection sticker attached to my water heater. It was a real sticker, the same type contractors leave after inspections. The problem was simple. Nobody should have been inside my apartment. I immediately reviewed footage from my living room security camera. At first, everything looked normal. Then I noticed movement at the edge of the hallway around 3:17 in the morning. A shadow crossed briefly through the frame. The camera never captured a full person, but it captured enough. I was asleep during that time. The shadow wasn't me. My stomach dropped as I replayed the footage again and again. Someone had entered my apartment while I slept. The situation was no longer about attempted access. Someone had already gotten inside. Management changed building access codes, door locks, and announced new security procedures. Residents received emails assuring everyone that the issue was under control. A few days later, another incident proved otherwise. Someone entered the package room without authorization. Security footage showed the same man. Gray work shirt, tablet, confident walk. Nobody stopped him. Nobody questioned him. Everyone assumed he belonged there. By the time police arrived, he was gone. That was when I realized the true strength of his method. He wasn't relying on force. He wasn't breaking doors down. He was exploiting trust. People naturally hesitate to challenge someone who looks official. He understood that better than anyone. One night around midnight, I heard footsteps outside my apartment. At first, I ignored them because people walked through the hallway all the time. Then the footsteps stopped directly outside my door. I muted my television. The silence continued. Several minutes passed. Eventually, I looked through the peephole. The hallway appeared empty. Then I noticed a shadow. Someone was standing against the wall beside my door, just outside the peephole's view, waiting. I stepped away immediately. The shadow remained there for nearly 15 minutes before finally disappearing. When I checked outside later, another maintenance notice sat on the floor. This one included my full name instead of just my apartment number. Seeing my name printed there made everything feel personal. Whoever was doing this knew exactly who I was. After that, I changed my routine. Different parking spots, different arrival times, different routes home. It didn't matter. The man adapted again. One evening, I arrived home earlier than usual and noticed a gray sedan parked across from my building. The engine was running. The driver looked away the moment he noticed me watching. I entered through a side entrance and observed the vehicle from the lobby. The sedan slowly circled the property twice before leaving. The following morning, another resident told me someone claiming to be maintenance had been asking questions about me. what time I usually got home, whether I lived alone, whether I worked weekends. The situation no longer felt random. I was being specifically watched. The physical attempt happened roughly 2 weeks later. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to a metallic scraping sound. At first, I assumed it came from somewhere else. Then I heard it again directly outside my apartment. The sound was unmistakable. Someone was working on the lock. No kicking, no pounding, just quiet, careful scraping. I immediately called 911. The dispatcher stayed on the line. The scraping continued for nearly a minute, then it stopped. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps moving away. Police arrived quickly and found fresh tool marks around the lock. The damage was obvious. Whoever had been outside escaped before officers arrived. The officers documented everything and left, but the feeling that someone had nearly entered my apartment stayed with me long afterward. That incident ended any possibility of me staying. I broke my lease and moved out. The decision cost thousands of dollars. Lease penalties, moving expenses, deposits, storage fees. Everything added up quickly. Friends told me I was overreacting. Maybe they were right, maybe they weren't. What I knew was that I couldn't sleep comfortably anymore. Every unexpected noise made me check the door. Every knock made me tense up. Every maintenance uniform immediately made me suspicious. Eventually, I relocated to another apartment complex across town. The financial loss hurt. The long-term habit stayed with me much longer. Even today, I verify every maintenance visit before opening my door. About 6 months after moving, a former neighbor called me with an update. The man had never been identified. Reports continued appearing across apartment complexes throughout the area. Different neighborhoods, same gray shirt, same fake authority, same attempts to gain access. The most disturbing part wasn't that he kept appearing, it was how often people trusted him. Apartment communities changed codes, installed cameras, hired security, and sent warnings, yet incidents continued. The weakness wasn't the locks. It wasn't the security systems. It wasn't the buildings. It was trust. People naturally assume someone wearing a uniform belongs there. My former neighbor told me about another woman who reported a fake maintenance worker. Security footage later showed him walking directly past a real maintenance employee. Neither one questioned the other. They passed each other like co-workers. The woman never opened her door, but several other residents did. According to reports, situations like that never completely stopped, which means somewhere, in some apartment complex, someone is probably standing outside a door right now pretending to belong there, waiting for somebody to trust the uniform long enough to let him inside. If you've ever had someone knock on your door claiming to be maintenance, delivery, security, or another authority figure, let me know in the comments. Always verify who you're dealing with before opening your door, especially when something feels off. And if you enjoy stories about real-world dangers, access violations, and everyday situations that become something much worse, subscribe to the Urban Warning and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next warning.